Добрый вечер.
In the broadcast, the news from the television company Ostankino. The president of Russia hosted in the Kremlin today a large group of intelligentsia who turned to him with an open letter from the pages of the newspaper Izvestia. In this letter, a protest was expressed against the behind-the-scenes facilitating of opposition supporters in assuming heading posts in government, against the isolation of the head of state from democratic parties and the public. Responding to this letter and prefacing the serious conversation about the state of affairs in Russia, Boris Yeltsin in his speech said, "I share those concerns which you have brought to the attention of the entire public of Russia, and not only Russia, of course, but the entire world. Yes, the situation is serious, and we shouldn't placate ourselves. If they say that a move for a person is like a fire, then reforms for the country are probably a real typhoon. We were forced to enter the course of reforms with such determination that, unfortunately, we didn't have time to contemplate all rescue measures. In these storm conditions, this, you understand yourselves, would have been extremely difficult. Reforms have exposed many sores, but not for every sore was a ready medicine found. For many medications, the prescriptions are yet to be formulated. But you are correct in your optimistic comment. The Kremlin, in the support of the presidential power, did provide that minimum of stability which is necessary for furthering reforms. Among the basic proportion of the Russian population, common sense does prevail. But at the same time, there is a fatigue and even an allergy to protracted meetings. In the opinion of those gathered, this is exploited in the State Duma by the legalized opposition and their fascist-inclined aides outside the walls of this institution. But the wave of fatigues and meetings and the impoverishment of a section of the Russian population brightly flourishing is open fascism and publications of this line of thought. Could we have even imagined that in our country fascism would begin to gain power, and it is gaining power. It has its antecedents, the grey building on the old square, and across from it, the house on Lozhanka. You did a very good thing in placing a veto on the draft of Poltaranyan. But this matter is not finished. I cannot name my source, but I tell you absolutely precisely, Poltaranyan has an agreement with Zyuganov and with Zhirinovsky that if they support his fund, he will deliver mass media to them in a paper bag, and he will control them. This would be an unprecedented monopoly and an unprecedented self-enrichment. And if we think about the power struggle at elections, this will be a most powerful weapon at the elections. This cannot be permitted. The focal event at the session of the State Duma today was discussion of the report of the Minister of Defense on the condition of the armed forces. Several deputies yesterday did not conceal their intention to demand the resignation of Pavel Grachev because of allegations of involvement in the corruption within the army. The anti-hero of several newspaper publications lately, the Minister of Defense Pavel Grachev, stated, speaking today in the State Duma, that the country and the parliamentarians are indebted to the army, which is only to 40% equipped with contemporary technology, suffering from chronic shortage of finances and personnel. You are right to ask me of this in full strictness. I'm prepared to answer before you. But you also give the military an honest response. Why today does our society relate to the army as to an inanimate object, with indifference, unceremoniously, and often cruelly? At the same time, Pavel Grachev emphasized that the army is combat capable and prepared to defend the homeland against any threat, despite, in the minister's opinion, the damaging budget. Skeptically assessing perspectives of elevating armed forces to a purely professional basis, the Minister of Defense entreated that the army not be brought to despair given the instability which continues in the world. But despite certain predictions, Pavel Grachev's appearance in the State Duma did not result in his dismissal, and the minister himself, who admitted that he enjoyed interacting with deputies, has no intention to voluntarily abandon his post. Evidently, left satisfied with the minister's interaction with deputies was Sergei Stepashin, who in the Duma today today presented the draft law on federal organs of counterintelligence. The document, which considers the specifics of the period being endured by Russia and specifically suggests the possibility of creating an investigative apparatus within the special services, was adopted in the first reading, and the deputies voted to deny the LDPR leader the right to speak at 3 subsequent meetings of the chamber after Vladimir Zhirinovsky, called the director of the FSK, an agent of the CIA and Mossad. Subsequently, it became evident that this decision contradicts regulations. However, for Vladimir Zhirinovsky, the incident will result in a subpoena in court. The behavior of the Deputy Zhirinovsky was the reason for the statement issued to the Duma by the Federal Service of Counterintelligence. The Minister of Internal Affairs and the Prosecutor General, in the statement, as justly noted, it's impermissible to turn discussions in the highest organ of power of vital problems of the homeland into a farce and criticism of leaders of government structures into a primitive, shameless ridicule. It would be hopeful, it says in the statement, that the State Duma will adopt measures to prevent cases when the national electives, using their deputy immunity, forget common human norms and parliamentary ethics. By plan, the State Duma today was to adopt a resolution on the question of urgent measures in the battle with crime. But the issue was sent off to be reworked. However, it is singularly seen as the most vital in all society. Not by coincidence, the Premier Chernomyrdin, who tomorrow will start touring the countries of the Middle East, deemed it necessary to express himself about it today. Responding to the question of our correspondent, he said, "What is the main shortcoming today of our law enforcement organs? Overall, they are somewhat behind that perestroika which should be in place today. The criminal world is far quicker in restructuring. And within the development of democracy, such a spread of crime was born, which previously the Ministry of Internal Affairs did not know nor even thought about. And today, now, we must all understand and become involved in that battle. And first of all, mostly, we must begin ourselves, the government, the parliament. Today, in order to battle crime, we need laws. And in what situation did we place the employees of the law enforcement organs? Have a look. They die in catching criminals, and 1 week later the criminals are free again. You know, this is a very difficult question today, to place the blame on someone. Therefore, here I would not make such definite, certain accusations. The Ministry of Internal Affairs or the Minister Yedin is at fault. Perhaps we should prostrate ourselves before Yedin for what he does. The other matter is that we all today should re-examine our attitude. And this concerns the entire society. But first of all, I have in mind the government and all those structures which are responsible. And overall, the entire situation which we have today demands profound understanding. The visit of the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs to France continues. Apart from issues of two-sided relations, today in Paris they discussed the problem of Bosnian regularization. An example of concrete cooperation between France and Russia was the signing during the official visit to Paris of Andrei Kozyrov of the agreement on the construction at France's expense near Novosibirsk a storage facility for non-radioactive hydrogen-containing materials derived from nuclear weapons charges after the dismantling of Russian nuclear weapons subject to annihilation. The facility for 3,000 containers will be built by France near Cluj and will permit Russia to store safely a large volume of nuclear materials designated for subsequent use in peaceful objectives. Today in Paris, a three-sided meeting was held among the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Russia and France with their British counterpart, Douglas Hurd. On the discussed Bosnian problem, they were unanimous in the opinion regarding the need to preserve unity of the contact group, jointly achieve the adoption by all participants of the Bosnian conflict, the peace plan developed in Geneva. As previously, it is supported by the United States as well, judging by the last assurances received in Paris from Washington. The administration of the President Clinton developed a concrete plan for military aid to the Muslim government in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This, citing a memorandum for service use, was reported by the television company ABC. Plans are also in place in the event that in Washington a final unilateral decision is reached to secede from the embargo imposed by the UN Security Council on deliveries of weapons to former Yugoslavia. The army of the Bosnian Serbs in counter-aggression retrieved almost all territories in western Bosnia seized by Muslims last week and is now on the threshold of the western enclave of Bihać. According to certain reports on cities' peripheral areas, street clashes are underway. Evidently, Bosnian Serbs are in no rush to occupy Bihać because this city was declared by the UN forces a safe zone, after violation of which NATO planes again could begin to bomb Serb territory. With the 5th Muslim Corps faithful to Sarajevo authorities, Bosnian Serbs evidently will have an opportunity to deal with the moderate Muslim separatist units headed by the leader of this region for many years, Fikret Avdic. Seizing the moment, this old rival of Aliv Izetbegovic is advancing with his units from the north near Velika Kladuša. Leaders of peacekeeping forces in NATO, who 1 week ago did not notice the beginning of the aggression of the 5th Corps from Bihać, now suddenly remembered that this is an exclusion zone. However, in the resolving of the question whom to punish, evidently they are confused, since they don't know what attitude to take to Fikret Avdic's regiment. The International Contact Group hurriedly is attempting to rework its plan with new conditions, promising to the Bosnian Serbs at least part of what they are demanding. We continue. The combat technology of the Interim Council of Chechnya in opposition to Jahar Dudayev this morning demolished the support point of the government forces in the village Dolinsk, which is 15 kilometers from Grozny. As Itartas was told in the administration of the Interim Council, the operation was conducted during relocating convoys of combat technology from the village Znamensky to the city Urus-Martan, controlled by the opposition. But leaders of official Grozny continue to assert that the tanks and combat technology come to the aid of the opposition from northern Ossetia. Leaders of the latter republic and the opposition of Chechnya categorically refute this, stating that the tank operation is conducted by units of the Interim Council with specially prepared Chechnya crews. The new Russian price policy is among the most imperative economic problems of the country. This is confirmed also by the fact that in continuing yesterday's session of government, the leadership of the Economics Ministry today held a special press conference on the question of price reform. As was emphasized at the press conference, its success or failure will define the fate of the budget for 1995 and the further progress of reforms. The main thesis of the new price policy: all prices are free except for prices on goods of natural monopolists. The latter are strictly stipulated in 3 lists: the first for the federal level, the second for regions, and third for those who are not obliged but may make certain amendments. The list of items where prices will float freely is more difficult to define, since many regions, including Moscow, have an abundance of supplementary regulators. With the adoption of the decree, everyone, including the Moscow authorities, will not be permitted to establish their own prices by local resolutions. And yet the list of districts where free prices will be in effect can be defined. They are mostly oil and oil products, trade surcharges, and apart from that, free prices will apply to passenger and baggage transits by air, sea, or river conveyance, for hard fuel and kerosene, etc. The Economics Ministry feels that free prices on oil will not cause a severe jump on prices on oil products, in any case not more than between 15 to 20%, but at the same time market prices will force the economizing of raw sources and adopting energy conserving technologies, including what applies to automobiles. The resolution contains a revocation of all quotas on the export of oil and oil products, and so that the country would not be completely raided, all exporters will have no discounts and export will be regulated by excise duty. The unprecedented right to forcefully remove from accounts of debtors payment for electrical power was given to banks by the administration of the Arkhangelsk district. Such an extreme method of transactions will be in effect until the 1st of April next year. Consumer debts to the energy sector are calculated at tens of billions of rubles. The commercial bank Charo of sad renown is left without directorship. The chairman of the bank, Vladimir Rachuk, and his deputy, and also his spouse, Olga Frantsovna, by decision of the board of founders of the bank, have resigned. The agency RIA learned that Charo's liabilities were 180 billion rubles and its assets were only 140 billion. Representatives of the central bank told the Russian information agency that the crisis with Charo was caused by unjustifiably high interest rates on deposits and pursuing a risky credit policy. In search of ways to stabilize the financial market for Russian entrepreneurs, the foreign experience is edifying as previously. Every second adult is a shareholder in Sweden, and judging by the activity of the population on the securities market, Sweden is firmly in first place in the world. The operations of the independent union of shareholders is financed only through members' donations, regular shareholders. Its hired experts scrupulously follow the operations of all relatively major companies, study their annual reports, and pronounce verdicts on how well the company's affairs are progressing. Later, their conclusions in accessible language are published in the magazine of the union, and further, the shareholder, who is well backed by that same union, does what they call here votes with his feet. In all solid banks, just like this largest, the Skandinava Skarskia, displayed is the shareholders' magazine, an invisible spot. According to one of the directors of the union, Mr. Nordwall, during the last 3 years, Sweden has seen 10 major bankruptcies. Certain shareholders sustained great losses, but to organize a demonstration because of this, no one even thinks of that here, just as appealing to the government for assistance. And why should it protect shareholders? Because people know that they risk when they buy shares. The situation on the securities market is no more predictable than the weather, and the clear sky here can just as suddenly change into a storm. However, the Swedish shareholders have sufficient chances not to become casualties of the disaster because their choice is based on precise revelations from the independent union of shareholders and not on the appeal of an advertising campaign of a joint share society. The financial system of Russia has become a hostage of the mafia. Such a categorical conclusion is contained in the statement of the UN Secretariat prepared on the occasion of the Conference on the Organized Transnational Crime. UN experts draw also attention to the fact that contraband of weapons and precious metals, which cost billions of dollars, leave Russia unregulated every month. In today's reports, there is a concrete example confirming that conclusion. A convoy of 11 wagons with a contraband cargo of non-ferrous metals at a cost of $1.5 million was detained by law enforcement organs near the Latvian border. 700 tons of copper and bronze ingots were being transported from Yekaterinburg to one of the Baltic ports, from where the cargo was destined to Holland. One of the wagons of copper cargo the criminals did managed to push through the borders. The rest has been detained, just as the organizers of this largest attempt at contraband in the last few years, among them the deputy director of the Ilyietsk branch of the railway and 2 businessmen from Latvia. But Russian business flourishes mostly on the backdrop of legal international cooperation. The effective development of the Russian, and not only the Russian, economy is impossible without interaction with international business circles. The Trade Industrial Chamber of the Russian Federation is required to support the stimulation of this interaction. When the chamber was created in October of 1991, it accredited 14 foreign firms. And today, only 3 years later, the American corporation Manpower International received a 1,000-fold permit. All these 1,000 companies, just as a multitude of Russian participants in the Trade Industrial Chamber, will contribute greatly in strengthening and furthering developing the economy of Russia. To show oneself off and be liked and to sell. In America, that's business, and there is no other way. Ours have also understood this. They showed an airplane here. The Il-96M is an unusual craft. The engines are American, from Pratt & Whitney. The navigational system by the Collins firm. The American Deputy Trade Secretary Warren and other orators said that such joint work in the area of aviation space industry previously was unthinkable. America will receive 2,500 jobs from California to Minnesota. Russia will receive a world-class plane on which one may fly in comfort. However, what is presented as success could in truth be a stumbling block. Russia is short of money for the production of its airplane. American credit guarantees are needed, but as we were told, it will not be easy to get support. I have no doubt that they will have little interest in this aid being there, and naturally it is competition. It was, and it always will be. Viktor Glukhik, the chairman of the Russian State Committee on Defense Sectors of Industry, spoke about Boeing, the #1 airplane firm in America. It's curious, the Il-96M was to be shown on Boeing territory in Seattle during the visit of the President Yeltsin to America in September, but then our airplane did not show, and Boeing was promised that Russian excise duties would be reduced for it. Here, the victor will be the strongest on one side, and the persistent side will overcome the other. Henrik Novossilov, the general constructor. In this multi-billion business, not everything depends on the constructors. We quite quickly became accustomed to abundance in our stores. One may buy anything and at any time of the day. And the most important thing, there is a choice. So let's talk about food products. In any average self-respecting store, you will find an assortment of sausages, various meat cuts, fruits and vegetables, whose names you've never even heard before, and a great variety of goods with bright-colored packaging. In general, there is a choice, and here a small problem arises. The problem is that we are brought goods from all countries of the world and not always of the best quality. Often behind bright packaging, there are goods hidden which were bought cheaply in third-world countries or even in Europe from shady producers. Unfortunately, government control in this what would seem to be a significant area is quite ineffective. Therefore, in choosing what to buy, one must rely only on one's own intuition. In the entire world, the purchasers define the quality of goods based on the reputation of the producers. It's no secret that now demand for large cities of Russia are satisfied mostly through import. On the Russian market, there is a sufficient number of firms involved in deliveries of goods. One of the largest, Marcon, from the very beginning set its course to supply foods of the highest quality from Denmark, France, and Finland. This is quite a rare example for our young, just forming market, where in the overall scenario, the principle of buy cheaper, sell for more prevails. Incidentally, this ideology has no future. Gradually, with saturation of the market and the raising in the standard of living, which undoubtedly will rise someday for us, people will be more selective in choice and probably most so in food. We are convinced that only with guaranteed quality can one have a guaranteed customer, because if once you sell a sub-grade good, you will lose that purchaser forever. It's acceptable to think that the standard of life is defined in ratio between money spent for food and housing to the money spent on all the rest. For an example, for rest, recreation, cinema, or live theater. However, the quality of life is mostly defined by the quality of what we receive for our money. Viktor Yedin and the Minister of Internal Affairs of Poland, Andrzej Michalowski, who is in Moscow on a business trip, initialed today a joint document providing for the closest interaction of their departments, which, according to Viktor Yedin, should be conducted daily. And one more purpose of the Polish Ministry of Internal Affairs delegation in Moscow at a press conference was to close the question with the known incident at the East Terminal in Warsaw on the 23rd of October, in which Russian passengers suffered on the train Moscow-Brussels, first robbed by thieves and then later violently treated by the Polish police. On an official level, this purpose has been achieved. We are certain that the Polish side is pursuing an absolutely correct professional path and will fully be able to clarify all circumstances of that unpleasant incident. Andrzej Michalowski stated that the Polish police was certainly out of bounds in its actions on the Warsaw terminal. The patrol wasted time in pursuing the thieves, and on the second half of the incident, which affects the actions of the police against the passengers, the Warsaw prosecutor is also investigating a possible exceeding of powers by the police. Its action in this case is explained by the need to settle matters with the raw passengers who were hindering the departure of the train, which was already late. Michalowski says that for now, violation of the law by police was not proven, but in any case, friendly relations between our countries are far more precious than offenses, which could still arise for various reasons. The 26-year-old Martin Duran, who in the end of last month shot at the White House today, had one more charge laid against him in the assassination attempt on the life of the president, and this could mean a life prison sentence for him. As the prosecutor in charge of the investigation stated, the search of his vehicle and his conversation with various people indicated that he had planned to kill the president. Last week was possibly the most dramatic in the history of Irish politics. The coalition government collapsed, the president of the Supreme Court resigned, and the Prime Minister as well. Sometimes we win, but sometimes we lose. So, philosophically, saying farewell to Parliament and the country on Thursday was Albert Reynolds. His departure is ironical because the coalition government which he headed won more than it lost. In less than 2 years, order with finances was created. Ireland surpassed all countries of the European community in speed of economic growth, and finally, the North Ireland problem was brought out of stalemate. And because of disagreement with his key partner in the coalition, the Liberal Party, its leader, Dick Sprint, a sudden end. And what next? The question of a new leader of the party, Fianna Fáil, prominent in the former coalition, will be resolved in the next days. The Minister of Finance is in the former cabinet. Bernard Horn has a chance, excluding even the political resurrection from the dead of Albert Reynolds. Shufflings and new alliances will take a while, and there is strong concern that the political crisis can impede the process of regularizing the Ulster problem. However, even the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Great Britain, Douglas Hurt, and leader of Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams, for the first time incidentally he was permitted to England and the British Parliament, expressed approximately the same thought. The regularization process is more than the fate of one person. In the mountainous kingdom of Nepal, the Communists are close to victory at the general parliamentary elections. The Communist Party of Nepal, uniting the Marxist-Leninists and other left forces, won the majority of mandates already, but the final results of the elections will be known not less than in 1 week. If the left forces do take power in the monarchy of Nepal, a unique situation will develop. The head of state, the King Virendra, will be forced to live together with a cabinet of communists. Look at these figures. They are in the Flight Control Center over the map of the Earth and indicate how many times the Mir station has orbited around the planet. Last night, late, the number 50,000 suddenly lit up. Is this much or is this little? In terms of flying, this is probably not too much. It's very interesting. Can 1,000 orbits be made? We always have a mischievous curiosity, which in general probably should somehow move progress. However, flight controllers told me that there are so many unknown elements which await the station in space that to calculate its entire volume is the same as controlling an entire system. For example, a country. And what you put in, that is what you'll receive back. Therefore, to pre-calculate all these criteria in running a country is very complicated. You need specialists for this, economists. In general, I may say that the mission, theoretically, is plausible. So maybe we should give them the chance. The last topic of our broadcast will be sports, and here to tell you about it is Oksana Polonskaya. All the best. Hello, briefly about the main sports events of the day. Today the regular matches in the Cup of the International Hockey League were held. In the Eastern Zone, Lada beat the Strytil by a large margin, 5-0, and in the Western Zone, Severstal hosted Moscow Dynamos. The result of that match is 1-4. And now news from the NHL. The lockout in the Hockey League of North America continues. Not a single discussion among the opposing sides led to bringing the positions closer. Specialists pessimistically predict that the 1994-95 season will unlikely be opened. In the NBA championships, the leader of the Atlantic Division, the New York Knicks, and leader of the Pacific Division, Golden State Orioles, met. The result, 100-109. In another match, Chicago lost to Houston, 83-106. I'll remind you that Houston has not yet had a single loss. Tennis in Frankfurt at the World ATP Championships in the white subdivision. The top world seed, Pete Sampras, in straight singles beat Stefan Edberg, and in the red group, Andre Agassi beat Michael Chang 6-4, 6-4. Only today the names of the semi-finalists became known. In the white group, the best chance to continue is for Becker and Sampras, and in the red, in the semi-finals already, are Andre Agassi and Sergio Bulgari. The winner in the white group will play the second place in the red group. Good evening. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. To the eastern part of Russia, an autumn inclement weather period has returned. The only cyclone, the center of which currently is over the north of the Karsk Sea, first dumped snow on almost all the European part of Russia, and later, with rains, began to wash out the snow. This cyclone is gradually losing force. However, it still has sufficient energy to affect our thoughts about an early winter. And so, in the north of the European territory, as previously, an area of low low pressure will remain and atmospheric fronts connected with it. Here we expect cloudy skies with isolated wet snows. The roads will be slippery during the day, 0-5. In the Kola Peninsula and in the Arhangis district, it's cooler, -7 to 12. In Karelia, 0-5. Here, isolated precipitation is expected. Just recently, in the Leningrad, Yaroslav, Novgorod, and Tver district, we were accustomed to February statistics of snows. The depth of snow reached 20 centimeters, became warmer, and later the snow began to melt. Tomorrow, -1 to 3, and slippery roads in those areas. Weather will improve in the Baltic countries. There will be breaks in the clouds. Precipitation is unlikely. This is the influence of a high-pressure area. During the day, around 0. In Lithuania, a bit warmer, +1 to 4. In Belarus, partly cloudy skies with isolated wet snow. During the day, around 0. In the central and central Chernozem areas, Saturday will have poor weather. The reason for that is an atmospheric front coming into the area from the west. Here, there will be some light precipitation with isolated fog patches. During the day, 0 in the northwest areas, down to -2. In Ukraine, the weather will improve. Precipitation will gradually cease, 4 to 9 during the day. In Moldova, the weather is the same, but with brief periods of rain. In the northern Caucasus and the Stavropol, Krasnodar, Rim areas, under the influence of atmospheric fronts, light rains will pass through and it will be cool, +3 to 8, only in Sochi as high as +14. Beyond the Caucasus, partly cloudy skies with light isolated rains during the day, +11 to 16. In St. Petersburg, partly cloudy skies during the day, -1 to -3. In Moscow, the temperatures will be around 0. There will be some precipitation. And that completes our broadcast. The Russian Food Bank hopes that your morning will be pleasant. Goodbye.